International Short Stories, Volume 2, English Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. International Short Stories, Volume 2, English Stories, edited by William Patton. Section 5. The Brothers. A Tale by Edward Bulwer Lytton. Part 1. "You must imagine, then, dear Gertrude," said Trevelyan, "a beautiful summer day, and by the same faculty that none possesses so richly as yourself, for it is you who can kindle something of that divine spark even in me, you must rebuild those shattered towers in the pomp of old, raise the gallery and the hall, man the battlements with warders, and give the proud banners of ancestral chivalry to wave upon the walls. But above, sloping half down the rock, you must fancy the hanging gardens of Liebenstein, fragrant with flowers and basking in the noonday sun." On the greenest turf, underneath an oak, there sat 3 persons in the bloom of youth. 2 of the 3 were brothers. The third was an orphan girl, whom the lord of the opposite tower of Sternfels had bequeathed to the protection of his brother, the chief of Liebenstein. The castle itself, and the domain that belonged to it, passed away from the female line, and became the heritage of Otho, the orphan's cousin, and the younger of the 2 brothers, now seated on the turf. "And oh," said the elder, whose name was Warbeck, "you've twined a chaplet for my brother, have you not, dearest Leoline, a simple flower for me?" The beautiful orphan, for beautiful she was, Gertrude, as the heroine of the tale you bid me tell ought to be, should she not have to the dreams of my fancy your lustrous hair, and your sweet smile, and your eyes of that blue that are never, never silent? Ah, pardon me that in a former tale I denied the heroine the beauty of your face, and remember that, to atone for it, I endowed her with the beauty of your mind." The beautiful orphan blushed to her temples, and culling from the flowers in her lap the freshest of the roses, began weaving them into a wreath for Warbeck. "It would be better," said the gay Otho, "to make my sober brother a chaplet of the rue and cypress. The rose is much too bright a flower for so serious a knight." Leoline held up her hand reprovingly. "Let him laugh, dearest cousin," said Warbeck, gazing passionately on her changing cheek. "And thou, Leoline, believe that the silent stream runs the deepest." At this moment they heard the voice of the old chief, their father, calling aloud for Leoline, for ever when he returned from the chase he wanted her gentle presence, and the hall was solitary to him if the light sound of her step and the music of her voice were not heard in welcome. Leoline hastened to her guardian, and the brothers were left alone. Nothing could be more dissimilar than the features and the respective characters of Otho and Warbeck. Otho's countenance was flushed with the brown hues of health. His eyes were of the brightest hazel, his dark hair wreathed in short curls round his open and fearless brow. The jest ever echoed on his lips, and his step was bounding as the foot of the hunter of the Alps. Bold and light was his spirit. If at times he betrayed the haughty insolence of youth, he felt generously, and though not ever ready to confess sorrow for a fault, he was at least ready to brave peril for a friend. But Warbeck's frame, though of equal strength, was more slender in its proportions than that of his brother. The fair long hair that characterized his northern race hung on either side of a countenance calm and pale, and deeply impressed with thought, even to sadness. His features, more majestic and regular than Otho's, rarely varied in their expression. More resolute even than Otho, he was less impetuous, more impassioned, and he was also less capricious. The brothers remained silent after Leoline had left them. Otho carelessly braced on his sword that he had lain aside on the grass, but Warbeck gathered up the flowers that had been touched by the soft hand of Leoline, and placed them in his bosom. The action disturbed Otho. He bit his lip and changed colour, At length he said, with a forced laugh, "It must be confessed, brother, that you carry your affection for our fair cousin to a degree that even relationship seems scarcely to warrant." "It is true," said Warbeck, calmly. "I love her with a love surpassing that of blood." "How," said Otho, fiercely, "do you dare think of Leoline as a bride?" "Dare?" repeated Warbeck, turning yet paler than his wonted hue. "Yes, I have said the word. Know, Warbeck, that I too love Leoline. I too claim her as my bride, and never, while I can wield a sword, never, while I wear the spurs of knighthood, will I render my claim to a living rival, even," he added, sinking his voice, "though that rival be my brother." Warbeck answered not. His very soul seemed stunned. He gazed long and wistfully on his brother, and then, turning his face away, ascended the rock without uttering a single word. This silence startled Otho. Accustomed to vent every emotion of his own, he could not comprehend the forbearance of his brother. He knew his high and brave nature too well to imagine that it arose from fear. Might it not be contempt? Or might he not at this moment intend to seek their father, and, the first to proclaim his love for the orphan, advance also the privilege of the elder born? As these suspicions flashed across him, the haughty Otho strode to his brother's side, and laying his hand on his arm, said, "Whither goes thou? And dost thou consent to surrender Leoline?" "Does she love thee, Otho?" answered Warbeck, breaking silence at last, and his voice spoke so deep an anguish that it arrested the passions of Otho even at their height. "It is thou who art now silent," continued Warbeck. "Speak. Doth she love thee, and has her lip confessed it?" "I have believed that she loved me," faltered Otho, "but she is of maiden bearing, and her lip, at least, has never told it." "Enough," said Warbeck, "release your hold." "Stay," said Otho, his suspicions returning, "stay yet one word. Dost thou seek my father? He ever honoured thee more than me. Wilt thou own to him thy love, and insist on thy right of birth? By my soul and my hope of heaven, do it, and one of us two must fall." "Poor boy," answered Warbeck, bitterly, "how little thou canst read the heart of one who loves truly. Thinkest thou I would wed her if she loved thee? Thinkest that I could, even to be blessed myself, give her one moment's pain? Out on the thought! Away!" "Then wilt not thou seek our father?" said Otho, abashed. "Our father? Has our father the keeping of Leoline's affection?" answered Warbeck, and shaking off his brother's grasp, he sought the way to the castle. As he entered the hall he heard the voice of Leoline. She was singing to the old chief one of the simple ballads of the time, that the warrior and the hunter loved to hear. He paused, lest he should break the spell, a spell stronger than a sorcerer's to him, and gazing upon Leoline's beautiful form, his heart sank within him. His brother and himself had each that day, as they sat in the gardens, given her a flower. His flower was the fresher and the rarer. His he saw not, but she wore his brother's in her bosom. The chief, lulled by the music and wearied with the toils of the chase, sank into sleep as the song ended, and Warbeck, coming forward, motioned to Leoline to follow him. He passed into a retired and solitary walk, and when they were a little distance from the castle, Warbeck turned round, and taking Leoline's hand, gently said, "Let us rest here for one moment, dearest cousin. I have much on my heart to say to thee." "And what is there?" answered Leoline, as they sat on a mossy bank, with the broad Rhine glancing below. "What is there that my kind Warbeck would ask of me? Ah, would it might be some favour, something in poor Leoline's power to grant, for ever from my birth you have been to me most tender, most kind. Jan, I have often heard them say, taught my first steps to walk. You formed my infant lips into language, and in after years, when my wild cousin was far away in the forests at the chase, you would brave his gay jest and remain at home, lest Leoline should be weary in the solitude. Ah, would I could repay you!" Warbeck turned away his cheek. His heart was very full, and it was some moments before he summoned courage to reply. "My fair cousin," said he, "those were happy days, but they were the days of childhood. New cares and new thoughts have now come on us. But I am still thy friend, Leoline, and still thou wilt confide in me thy young sorrows and thy young hopes, as thou ever didst. Wilt thou not, Leoline?" "Canst thou ask me?" said Leoline, and Warbeck, gazing on her face, saw that, though her eyes were full of tears, they yet looked steadily upon his, and he knew that she loved him only as a sister. He sighed, and paused again ere he resumed. "Enough," said he. "Now to my task. Once on a time, dear cousin, there lived among the mountains a certain chief who had 2 sons, and an orphan like thyself dwelt also in his halls. And the elder son but no matter, let us not waste words on him. The younger son, then, loved the orphan dearly, more dearly than cousins love, and fearful of refusal, he prayed the elder one to urge his suit to the orphan. Leoline, my tale is done. Canst thou not love Otho as he loves thee?" And now, lifting his eyes to Leoline, he saw that she trembled violently, and her cheek was covered with blushes. "Say," continued he, mastering himself, "is not that flower, his present, a token that he is chiefly in thy thoughts? Ah, Warbeck, do not deem me ungrateful that I wear not yours also, but—" "Hush!" said Warbeck hastily. "I am but as thy brother. Is not Otho more? He is young, brave, and beautiful. God grant that he may deserve thee, if thou givest him so rich a gift as thy affections." "I saw less of Otho in my childhood," said Leoline evasively, "therefore his kindness of late years seemed stranger to me than thine." "And thou wilt not then reject him? Thou wilt be his bride?" "And thy sister," answered Leoline. "Bless thee, mine own dear cousin. One brother's kiss, then, and farewell. Otho shall thank thee for himself." He kissed her forehead calmly, and turning away, plunged into the thicket. Then, nor till then, he gave vent to such emotions as, had Leoline seen them, Otho's suit had been lost for ever. For passionately, deeply as in her fond and innocent heart she loved Otho, the happiness of Warbeck was not less dear to her. When the young knight had recovered his self-possession, he went in search of Otho. He found him alone in the wood, leaning with folded arms against a tree, and gazing moodily on the ground. Warbeck's noble heart was touched at his brother's dejection. "Cheer thee, Otho," said he, "I bring thee no bad tidings. I have seen Leoline, I have conversed with her. Nay, start not, she loves thee, she is thine." "Generous, generous Warbeck!" exclaimed Otho, and he threw himself on his brother's neck. "No, no," said he, "this must not be. Thou hast the elder claim. I resign her to thee. Forgive me my waywardness, brother, forgive me." "Think of the past no more," said Warbeck. "The love of Leoline is an excuse for greater offences than thine. And now be kind to her. Her nature is soft and keen. I know her well, for I have studied her faintest wish. Thou art hasty and quick of ire, but remember that a word wounds where love is deep. For my sake, as for hers, think more of her happiness than thine own. Now seek her. She waits to hear from thy lips the tale that sounded cold upon mine." With that he left his brother, and once more re-entering the castle, he went into the hall of his ancestors. His father still slept. He put his hand on his grey hair and blessed him. Then, stealing up to his chamber, he braced on his helm and armour, and thrice kissing the hilt of Fate's sword, said, with a flushed cheek, "Henceforth be thou my bride." And then, passing from the castle, he sped by the most solitary paths down the rock, gained the Rhine, and hailing one of the numerous fishermen of the river, won the opposite shore, and alone, but not sad, for his high heart supported him, and Leoline at least was happy, he hastened to Frankfort. The town was all gaiety and life. Arms clanged at every corner, the sounds of martial music, the wave of banners, the glittering of plumed casques, the neighing of war steeds, all united to stir the blood and inflame the sense. St. Bertrand had lifted the sacred cross along the shores of the Rhine, and the streets of Frankfort witnessed with what success. On that same day Warbeck assumed the sacred badge, and was enlisted among the knights of the Emperor Conrad. Now we must suppose some time to have elapsed, and Otho and Leoline were not yet wedded, for in the first fervour of his gratitude to his brother, Otho had proclaimed to his father and to Leoline the conquest Warbeck had obtained over himself, and Leoline, touched to the heart, would not consent that the wedding should take place immediately. "Let him at least," said she, "not be insulted by a premature festivity, and give him time, amongst the lofty beauties he will gaze upon in a far country, to forget, Otho, that he once loved her who is the beloved of thee." The old chief applauded this delicacy, and even Otho, in the first flush of his feelings towards his brother, did not venture to oppose it. They settled then that the marriage should take place at the end of a year. Months rolled away, and an absent and moody gloom settled upon Otho's brow. In his excursions with his gay companions among the neighbouring towns, he heard of nothing but the glory of the Crusaders, of the homage paid to the heroes of the cross at the courts they visited, of the adventures of their life, and the exciting spirit that animated their war. In fact, neither minstrel nor priest suffered the theme to grow cold, and the fame of those who had gone forth to the holy strife gave at once emulation and discontent to the youths who remained behind. "And my brother enjoys this ardent and glorious life," said the impatient Otho, "while I, whose arm is as strong and whose heart is as bold, languish here listening to the dull tales of a hoary sire and the silly songs of an orphan girl." His heart smote him at the last sentence, but he had already begun to weary of the gentle love of Leoline. Perhaps when he had no longer to gain a triumph over a rival, the excitement paled, or perhaps his proud spirit secretly chafed at being conquered by his brother in generosity, even when outshining him in the success of love. But poor Leoline, once taught that she was to consider Otho her betrothed, surrendered her heart entirely to his control. His wild spirit, his dark beauty, his daring valour, won while they awed her, and in the fitfulness of his nature were those perpetual springs of hope and fear that are the fountains of ever agitated love. She saw with increasing grief the change that was growing over Otho's mind, nor did she divine the cause. "Surely I have not offended him," thought she. Among the companions of Otho was one who possessed a singular sway over him. He was a knight of that mysterious order of the Temple which exercised at one time so great a command over the minds of men. A severe and dangerous wound in a brawl with an English knight had confined the Templar at Frankfort, and prevented his joining the crusade. During his slow recovery he had formed an intimacy with Otho, and taking up his residence at the castle of Liebenstein, had been struck with the beauty of Leoline. Prevented by his oath from marriage, he allowed himself a double license in love, and doubted not, could he disengage the young knight from his betrothed, that she would add a new conquest to the many he had already achieved. Artfully, therefore, he painted to Otho the various attractions of the holy cause, and above all he failed not to describe with glowing colours the beauties who, in the gorgeous East, distinguished with a prodigal favour the warriors of the cross. Dowries unknown in the more sterile mountains of the Rhine accompanied the hand of these beauteous maidens, and even a prince's daughter was not deemed, he said, too lofty a marriage for the heroes who might win kingdoms for themselves. "To me," said the Templar, "such hopes are eternally denied. But you, were you not already betrothed, what fortunes might await you?" By such discourses the ambition of Otho was perpetually aroused. They served to deepen his discontent at his present obscurity, and to convert to distaste the only solace it afforded in the innocence and affection of Leoline. One night a minstrel sought shelter from the storm in the halls of Liebenstein. His visit was welcomed by the chief, and he repaid the hospitality he had received by the exercise of his art. He sang of the chase, and the gaunt hound started from the hearth. He sang of love, and Otho, forgetting his restless dreams, approached to Leoline and laid himself at her feet. Louder then and louder rose the strain. The minstrel sang of war. He painted the feats of the Crusaders. He plunged into the thickest of the battle. The steed neighed, the trump sounded, and you might have heard the ringing of the steel. But when he came to signalize the names of the boldest knights, high among the loftiest sounded the name of Sir Warbeck of Liebenstein. Thrice had he saved the imperial banner, 2 chargers slain beneath him. He had covered their bodies with the fiercest of the foe. Gentle in the tent, and terrible in the fray, the minstrel should forget his craft ere the Rhine should forget its hero. The chief started from his seat. Leoline clasped the minstrel's hand. "Speak! You have seen him. He lives? He is honoured?" "I myself am but just from Palestine, brave chief and noble maiden. I saw the gallant knight of Liebenstein at the right hand of the imperial Conrad, and he, lady, was the only knight whom admiration shone upon without envy its shadow." "Who then," continued the minstrel, once more striking his harp, "who then would remain inglorious in the hall? Should not the banners of his sires reproach him as they wave? And shall not every voice from Palestine strike shame into his soul?" "Right!" cried Otho suddenly, and flinging himself at the feet of his father. "Thou hearest what my brother has done, and thine aged eyes weep tears of joy. Shall I only dishonour thine old age with a rusted sword? No! Grant me, like my brother, to go forth with the heroes of the cross." "Noble youth," cried the harper, "therein speaks the soul of Sir Warbeck. Hear him, Sir Knight, hear the noble youth." "Heaven cries aloud in his voice," said the Templar solemnly. "My son, I cannot chide thine ardour," said the old chief, raising him with trembling hands. "But Leoline, thy betrothed?" Pale as a statue, with ears that doubted their sense as they drank in the cruel words of her lover, stood the orphan. She did not speak. She scarcely breathed. She sank into her seat and gazed upon the ground, till, at the speech of the chief, both maiden pride and maiden tenderness restored her consciousness, and she said, "I, uncle? Shall I bid Otho stay when his wishes bid him depart?" "He will return to thee, noble lady, covered with glory," said the harper. But Otho said no more. The touching voice of Leoline went to his soul. He resumed his seat in silence, and Leoline, going up to him, whispered gently, "Act as though I were not," and left the hall to commune with her heart and to weep alone. "I can wed her before I go," said Otho suddenly, as he sat that night in the Templar's chamber. "Why, that is true, and leave thy bride in the first week? A hard trial." "Better than incur the chance of never calling her mine, dear, kind, beloved Leoline. Assuredly she deserves all from thee, and indeed it is no small sacrifice at thy years and with thy mane, to renounce for ever all interest among the noble maidens thou wilt visit. Ah, from the galleries of Constantinople what eyes will look down on thee, and what ears, learning that thou art Otho the bridegroom, will turn away, caring for thee no more. A bridegroom without a bride! Nay, man, much as the cross wants warriors, I am enough thy friend to tell thee, if thou weddest, to stay peaceably at home, and forget in the chase the labours of war, from which thou wouldest strip the ambition of love." "I would I knew what were best," said Otho irresolutely. "My brother, ha! shall he for ever excel me? But Leoline, how will she grieve, she who left him for me?" "Was that thy fault?" said the Templar gaily. "It may many times chance to thee again to be preferred to another. Troth, it is a sin under which the conscience may walk lightly enough. But sleep on it, Otho, my eyes grow heavy." The next day Otho sought Leoline, and proposed to her that their wedding should precede his parting; but so embarrassed was he, so divided between two wishes, that Leoline, offended, hurt, stung by his coldness, refused the proposal at once. She left him lest he should see her weep, and then she repented even of her just pride. Section 6